Rules for today. And with that, I would like to welcome Commissioner Lori Stegman. Thank you so much for joining us, and you will have 20 minutes to share.
Great. Thank you so much, Sahan, and great to see all of you. I really appreciate this opportunity. It seems like I've been at so many of these forums, excuse me, where we have like 20 seconds or 30 seconds to answer. And so it's like, I don't know what I'm going to do with 20 minutes, but I just really welcome the opportunity because I don't think that as candidates, we have sound bites and people don't really have an opportunity to know who we are or why we're running. So I really appreciate this opportunity. So just wanted to share a little bit about who I am and where I come from. Currently, I am the vice chair for the Multnomah County Board of Commissioners. I was the first Asian American in 168 years to ever be elected to the Board of County Commissioners. And I'm the first Korean American as well. And so we have a pretty remarkable board. Many of you are familiar with us. I have the privilege of serving on an all-female board of county commissioners. And the majority of our board is made up of women of color. And so I'm always just really proud of that fact and would argue that we have one of the most high functioning, most effective boards in the region. So I really am. It doesn't mean we always agree, but it means that we are always very respectful of one another and really appreciate the great working relationship that I have with my colleagues. So a little bit about me is that before I was a Multnomah County Commissioner, sorry, I'm losing my voice today. I was a Gresham City Councilor for 6 years. And the way that started is some people come up through, Portland PTAs or things like that. I actually came up kind of through the nonprofit world. I was a member of Seroptimus International of Gresham. And it's a group of women whose mission is to improve the lives of women and girls. And one of the reasons I love Seroptimus and I'm still a member is that I really love that they not only work locally on issues of like domestic violence, but they worked internationally. And I'll talk a little bit about my story and why that's so important in just a moment. But as a Gresham City Councilor, I love being a Gresham City Councilor. And as you know, cities do more of the infrastructure, not so much the human services. But while I was a Gresham City Councilor, I got to work on some pretty amazing projects. One of them is the downtown Rockwood. It's the urban renewal area. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. But Rockwood, the neighborhood that I grew up in, is one of the most low income, most diverse neighborhoods probably in the entire state. And that's where I grew up. That's where I've owned a business for the last 30 years. And that's where I really started out as a younger person and really wanted to serve my community, but had to wait until my business got off the ground a little bit more. And so fast forward 30 years later, I am now a county commissioner, and it really has been just the privilege of my life to serve East Multnomah County. So I wanted to talk a little bit about why am I running? So some of you may be familiar with Holt International. Harry and Bertha Holt were farmers in Cresswell, Oregon, and they had seen a video recording about the plight of Korean orphans in the aftermath of the Korean War. And quite literally, while Korea is a powerhouse, an economic engine today, 60 years ago, it was not. There was just a substantial amount of poverty, starvation, and there were many children that were orphans. I was one of those orphans. And so Harry and Bertha Holt saw this film that talked about the plight of these Korean orphans. And so they ultimately ended up adopting 8 of their own Korean children. And then they subsequently went on to become pioneers in international adoption. And so I'm really just incredibly blessed to be here and so fortunate. I've had some challenges, as we all do growing up, and love my family dearly. And while I'm very lucky, we had our challenges. My dad was a logger. He broke his back when he was in his 30s. And you all know that being a logger is one of the most, high risk types of jobs you can have. And anyway, he broke his back in his probably, late 30s. And so my family survived on state disability checks, which isn't much. And there were 7 people in my family. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, but she did kind of dabble here and there. She actually was a dog groomer. And so that's probably where I get my love for animals and for dogs. But, we struggled. I talk about, I grew up, we had access to food stamps, and food stamps were actually stamps back then. And the stigma around being poor was something that I had always carried with me throughout my life. And so that's something that I've always been really cognizant about, and always tried to work to try to better myself and improve my situation because I am so blessed. So got adopted when I was 6 months old. And, I was able to put myself through college because I had access, to student loans. And we know that, many people right now, especially if you have any type of involvement with the criminal justice system, you don't have access to those types of programs. And we know, you can't even get a license to cut someone's hair, which is ridiculous. So those are kind of some of the things that I think about, like, what are the challenges that people have to deal with every single day that prevent them from moving forward in life? And that's why I'm running, is that I was so lucky to have people or systems that were always there to help pull me back up. And I worked really hard, and I'm proud of where I am. And I also feel an immense responsibility to pay it forward and to help other folks, that next generation, come behind me. So the things that I really care about are addressing the root causes of, like, around generational poverty. And I think, when we talk about all of the challenges that our society is dealing with, from homelessness to, involvement in the criminal justice system, to mental health, behavioral health, all of those things, I'm always trying to think about, but how do we get to the root causes of those? And I think some of the root causes, which none of you will be surprised of, because this is what you do, this is your work, your life's work, is, working around generational poverty, working around trauma, shame, addiction, and racism, and how important it is for us to go upstream. So this morning, our Board of County Commissioners just got a briefing around an initiative called Transforming Justice. And I'm really excited. I'm actually a steering committee member on this program, because what we're really talking about are large scale, systematic changes of how we can divert people from the criminal justice system, and also, embrace the restorative practices instead of basically dehumanizing people, which is what our criminal justice system was set up to do, about how we can humanize them. And, Norway is a great model of some really significant work that they're doing around justice reform. And if you've ever heard of one of my favorite authors is Danielle Sered. She has a book called Until We Reckon. And that's exactly what she talks about, is how do we transform the system to not create additional trauma, but actually to restore people's lives. So one of the ways that I've been working on addressing those root causes is working around economic stability. If you go to my county website, there's something called an economic marginalization index. And it's basically data that you can break down by census tract that really highlights, what are the variables that contribute to poverty. It lists out, how many renters, and what the demographic information is, like low birth weights and all of those types of things. If you follow any of the work by Raj Chetty, who talks about that your zip code does not have to determine the trajectory of your life. But unfortunately, the data does point to that it does. And so growing up in the Rockwood neighborhood, which is, one of the most low income, most diverse neighborhoods, with over 80 languages spoken in Rockwood, it's really been my life's work to see how we could help people rise out of poverty. So one of the things that I'm really proud of is the downtown, it's called Downtown Rockwood. It's the urban renewal agency that I worked on when I was a Gresham City Councilor. So having grown up in that neighborhood, having owned a business there for the last 30 years, it has always been my heart and my passion to try to uplift people. So there's 3 buildings. We just did a ribbon cutting for the 3rd building, but the first 2 buildings are already up, and you probably are pretty familiar. In the first building, we have a daycare center. We also have Wallace Medical Concern. We have the Small Business Development Center, work source there. And it's just really, really exciting that we were able to build something that actually served the people that currently live in the neighborhood. Oh, and we have Oregon tradeswomen there also. So, and I should also mention, many of you may be aware that Rockwood is a food desert, and many of the grocery stores have left the area. And so part of the urban renewal is what's called the Rockwood Marketplace Hall. And so there'll be vendors, there'll be like a farmer's market, there'll be other culturally specific vendors. And so we really wanted to be able to fill that gap, because right now people get on the light rail and go all the way to Gateway to do their grocery shopping, because there aren't any major grocery stores. So we wanted to try to help fill that gap. And also part of that, what we ended up doing is we attracted 40 new businesses to locate in the urban renewal area. And we added 700 new jobs with an average salary of $62,000. And we also created the Rockwood Public Safety Building in Rockwood, and we increased housing, affordable housing. So I'm really, really happy about what that's turned out to be. The 3rd and final phase will be some multifamily units that will be breaking ground here in the next month or so. Some of the other things, I've been a small business owner, as I mentioned, for the last 30 years. So I've been an insurance agent. And so economic development is really important to me, because if I think about what would our society look like, what would our neighborhoods look like if everybody had a family wage job? And really that's what drives me in being a small business owner. I understand how challenging that is. But one of the things that we did is we created, and we got national recognition for this, is the Garage to Storefront program, where we waived system development charges and business licensing fees to encourage more businesses to locate both in our urban renewal area and downtown area. And when I think about what's going on in the city of Portland, the lessons that I learned as we redeveloped 1,200 acres in the urban renewal area, I think will really be transferable as we look at economic development. And my more recent project I'm working on is the Vance project. And that is about 90 acres between Stark and Division on about 190th. And I'm so excited because we just released the master plan. It's called the Vance Vision. And currently there's a park there. And then on the back side of the park is, it's a brownfield. It's kind of underutilized industrial area. There's a pit. It had been used for like gravel mining. It's also been a dump. So it's been a lot of different things, but it has never been redeveloped in many, many decades. And so that was one of the reasons that I became a county commissioner, is I would always drive by there and just think that was just such a waste, and wanted to see that redeveloped so that it could help serve the people that are living in the community. So when I first came on as county commissioner, that was one of the very first things that I did is I got together different departments at Multnomah County, which is kind of unusual for those of you who work in government. Sometimes we're a little bit siloed. And so for me to be able to work, with folks in our health department, in our county assets department, in our animal services department, and to bring kind of everybody to the table to say, what could we envision? What could we do with 90 acres? And how could that best serve our community? So we just released the master plan and we haven't decided exactly what will go there. But one of the organizations that we think will go there, we hope will go there, is our animal services department. And if you've ever been out to Troutdale recently, you know that they are currently in a very old, dilapidated building. It's very cramped, very small. But our hope is that we can relocate our animal services department to the Vance project. And we also want to expand job opportunities. So animal services has a lot of level entry jobs. And so we really want to create a workforce corridor or a center. So part of my plan as the next chair is to create an economic development department and a workforce stability department. As you know, we're the largest safety net provider in Oregon, and so folks depend on us and they need services. And I'm so pleased that we're able to help thousands of people. But what I don't think we do a good job of is offering people a path to a family wage job. And so by having an economic development department, I think we can do that better. So folks could have increased access to not only jobs maybe within the county, but also I want to work more closely with our community colleges and especially our partners in the trade unions. We all know that, jobs in the trades, you can make a decent, good family wage. And I forgot to mention too, Oregon Tradeswomen is also located in our downtown urban renewal areas. So again, this was really about how do we create a center, what we called it the catalyst site. And that's really, really what it is how do we create something that will attract and draw and serve people that currently live there. And I'm really excited and really grateful for all of the people and organizations that have come alongside us to make that vision a reality. And so I'm hoping to take that experience, that knowledge, and apply it countywide, and especially as we look at how to restore downtown Portland. I have some ideas about how we can do that. And then really, I think it's about, being creative too. We were one of the first cities in the nation to create a net zero wastewater treatment plan. And that actually resulted in $500,000 a year to taxpayers. So that's the kind of ingenuity that I will bring as the county chair. And then I also just wanted to talk a little bit about, some of the other accomplishments and things that we're doing. So I'm the only county commissioner. I currently represent East Multnomah County. So I have part of Portland. My district starts at about southeast 148. It includes Gresham, Fairview, Troutdale, Wood Village, and the unincorporated areas. So I have both urban and rural areas, which can make it challenging. But because I have those relationships with all of those different jurisdictions, it's resulted in some really amazing outcomes, like a $40 million investment in homeless services. We're also going to be receiving an East County Homeless Service Center with 50 beds of alternative shelter. We were also able to clear the way for 334 new units of deeply affordable housing. 100 of those is from the Troutdale site, and we're working with partners from Home Forward on that. And then I also work with the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office HOPE team, and they're really a model of community policing. And what they do is they engage with our houseless residents and connect them to services. So I've been really happy to ensure that they've had funding for their program for the last 5.5 years. And we're going to be adding a couple of navigation folks who will be able to provide those direct services. Some of the other things that I've done, I've been working on a grant that I received from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. It's a $100,000 grant around economic recovery. If you've all been over to Vienna Star, one of the things I want to look at is creating another service center, something maybe similar to Vienna Star in East County. We're also looking at a resilience hub. As you all know, many people died during the extreme heat event. So I want to create a resilience hub where these are standalone buildings, and eventually there would be hundreds of them. But the pilot would be a building that is micro solar powered, so that when the power grid goes down, we still have like an emergency center where people can go and receive whatever type of care or emergency services that they need to protect them from extreme weather events. And then, again, going back to jobs, I sponsored something called the Construction Diversity Equity Fund, which sets aside 1% of our capital projects. So to help people, especially women and people of color, so that when they enter the trades, they have access to those pre-apprenticeships. And I'm not sure how am I doing on time? Am I doing good?
You are actually right at 20 minutes.
Okay.
So if you have a couple more things to share, we can let you share that, but want to be able to move to the next section.
Okay.
soon.
All right. So I just want to mention, so here's my plan. Here's my vision. When I'm chair, I'm going to create an office of reentry services to prevent people from churning through our criminal justice system. I'm going to create a 24/7 first responder drop-off site and detox center, and we need to do that immediately, as you all know. And then I also want to advocate for the adoption of Portugal's model to our drug crisis. You all know that fentanyl and meth is literally killing our youth and folks every single day. And what Portugal does is that they create or they treat drug possession or use of drug as a health issue, and it's not a crime, and individuals are mandated to medical treatment, so they're required to go through treatment, but drug dealing is treated as a criminal act. And this approach has actually been proven. It's been more cost effective than incarceration, and their drug-related deaths have plummeted. So those are just a couple of the things that I'm really excited about and want to see come to fruition, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Stegman, for sharing. And now, everyone else, we will take approximately the next 30 minutes to let you all have the floor. So this is your chance to hear more specifically from Commissioner Stegman with any questions that you might have. So with that, I will hand it off to Leslie for questions and answers.
Thank you, Sahan. So just as a reminder, you can drop the questions into the chat. You can also raise your hand and we will go ahead and unmute you. If there are no questions from anybody in the audience right now, we'll, actually, we already have questions. Thank you, Laura. You can go ahead and unmute whenever you're ready.
Thanks, Leslie. Hi, Commissioner Stegman. Great to see you today. Thanks for being here. I wanted to talk a little bit about, or ask you a little bit about the 3000 challenge, and say thank you first for signing on to that. That's really appreciated. And I think a great show of support for that effort. My question is, how would you, as chair, sustain an effort like that, that is really focused on utilizing the skills and expertise that we have to amplify and build out relationships with housing providers, and keep doing that in an ongoing way? And of course, looking at the budgetary side of it as well, because we know that to make that 3000 challenge effort really successful, we want to make sure we can build out the budget of resources that are available to service providers to utilize in the ways that they know work. Thanks.
Thank you for the question, Laura. Absolutely. I got to tell you, thank you to every single one of you who worked together to bring the 3000 Challenge together. It is amazing. And I am so pumped. I'm so excited because I am a very, we can talk about what the problems are, but I'm a very action-oriented person. So like, okay, here's the problem. What are we going to do? And how are we going to implement actionable strategies that get people housed? And you all have done that. Like, you're making my job easy. So now we just have to go do it. So I appreciate, in my personal life, I mentioned that I've been an insurance agent. And we insure landlord properties. So I work with that population of property managers, property owners. So I already have a relationship with many of those organizations. And I think, no matter what discipline you're talking about, having a trusted messenger, whether that's somebody who is offering peer-to-peer services or somebody that is working in a particular industry, is always really helpful. So what I envision, Laura, is, and I'm working on it right now with the joint office, and I want to partner with you all because I know you've already been doing a lot of this work, but we could partner together to get whatever that pilot looks like to do the master leases. So just on my own, I've already been working with a nonprofit anti-property management company to house 20 people right now that are homeless. And you all know that, and these people are employed by the nonprofit and they make enough money to make the monthly rent. But what they don't have, just like if you were going to go buy a house, and that's a whole nother topic, is that people can't even get into the housing market, but you can't even afford to get into an apartment. So, you know what the barriers are. It's the first and last month's rent or the deposit, whatever it is that you need. Nobody has the $2,000 or $3,000 that you need. But if you could get that taken care of, and then secondarily, again, if you have a poor rental history or you have any justice involvement, there could be a multitude of reasons why, frankly, folks that don't have housing right now, they would never qualify on an application for a rental property. So those are inherent problems, inherent barriers that we have to figure out, how do we work around? And so what I envision, and I think that there is I don't know what the right word is. There's concern on property managers' side to think about, well, do I want to be part of the 3000 Challenge? And what types of risk may be associated if I'm entering into these master leases? But I've talked to several of you that have been doing this work literally for decades, and was amazed to hear that it's actually been a really great positive program, not only for the individuals that are being housed, but for the landlords too, because it guarantees their rent. It relieves some of the uncertainty about if they're going to be responsible for certain repairs. And so I want to be able to take that and work alongside you and package a pilot program where we can take it really on a much larger scale. And we did this, well, you all did it. And I know many of you have been working many decades when we worked around solving veterans homelessness. So like sometimes, we know, how to address some of the problems. And I think we just have to take it to scale. So I'm going to be your cheerleader because I have the business side of things. I also have the heart and the passion. And I think, and being able to navigate the bureaucracy of government. I come from the private sector. And so when I came to Multnomah County, I'm just like, why can't we just do X? well, there's 1,000 reasons why you just can't do X. And so that's been something that I've really been trying to do, is trying to flatten the organization and remove the barriers that just don't make sense. So it's going to be a partnership, but I'm just so happy, really, really, just so much gratitude to all of you who actually came up with a solution. And I think we just have to refine it. And then once we get that refined, then I think we take it on the road, and let's get our landlords involved. So thank you for the question.
Thank you. Our next question is from Andy. Andy, you can go ahead and unmute.
Commissioner Stegman, so great to have you join us today. It's really nice to get a chance to just hear, like you say, a little bit more than a 2-minute soundbite. So I'm glad we've had this opportunity. Thanks for everything you're doing. As you mentioned, the county is really the provider of the social safety net in our region. It's the community action organization. And there's I can just look at this call and see so many folks and organizations who are part of that web and that connection of services that really makes, really creates that safety in our community. And as you know, that's being challenged by the wages we're able to pay. And just in the last year, we know that rent went up an average of 40% in Portland, making us one of the top rent burdened regions in the nation. And we have the challenge, I think, of continuing to provide an effective, robust workforce, but we're falling behind. We're really hopeful that we can find a new partner who understands this challenge. It's a business challenge, as you can understand and see, and we've got to get wages especially for our frontline employees, to at least that level of a housing wage, which we know in our region is upwards of $25 an hour or more. We're not there. And I'm really concerned about our ability to deliver services moving forward and to realize the visions and the good ideas that we have. So love to hear about how you could support that effort.
Yes, Andy. I mean, it's such a crazy dichotomy, is that, the people that we are asking to serve, our most vulnerable residents, are often people that qualify and or are receiving county services. So that discrepancy, we have to address it. I think about trying to be creative. You're all probably familiar with Albertina Kerr. Like, they built housing, as you know. Now they weren't, some of it is quote workforce housing that I think, but I believe their employees did have to apply. But I do try to think about, well, what are some other ways? And maybe it is about providing some type of affordable housing for nonprofits. So I'd like to explore that a little bit. But yes, the discrepancy, and I know that folks that work for you often come to the county, and we have to true up that difference. And I'm not sure, because you all have such expertise in what you do, and I think that that's incredibly important and valuable. And frankly, I just don't think that the county could ever deliver high quality services in the way that you all have been if we were to bring that in-house. And so trying to figure out that gap of, like, how do we fill that gap is something that I really, really want to work on. And, I think it is not sustainable. And, I know looking at Medicaid reimbursement rate increases might be one way, but I think we just frankly have to pay you more. I mean, really, that's the bottom line. And I mean, I don't know, I think the cost of our houseless population, like, if we were really, ultimately the goal is to put y'all out of business, right? Like, if we could, we're already spending hundreds of thousands of dollars in our ERs, in our public safety, and that, like, we are paying the cost of not solving the root cause of homelessness and, justice involvement. So I do think that there is a way to shift that money so that we could support and provide family wages. I mean, that should be the bare minimum. I do think it's frankly inexcusable that the county, we are the safety net provider. Like, that's our job, is to help people on their worst day. And yet we're not walking the walk, and we need to. And so I will advocate for that. And, and I think about too, there's so many people that are leaving, like, who wants to go into social work or behavioral health? And when the wages are so low, that we have to be able to attract a new workforce. And, and I think at the end of the day too, you're not doing this for the money. I know that. You're doing this because you deeply care about our community and the people that are struggling, and you want to help them. And I think you should be paid a family wage to do that at a minimum.
Thank you. Any other questions? Again, raise your hand or put it in the chat. Our next question is from Madison, and it is, how will you work to ensure true mental health and disability needs are being addressed in Portland Metro?
Yeah, so I'm really excited. You probably heard, I know you're all well aware of the Behavioral Health Resource Center. So I got to tour it just the other day, and it's really beautiful. Cannot wait. And I think this is probably one of the first of this type of facilities in the region. And really what my goal around that would be is to, once we get this is really more or less a pilot. And I think we're going to have about 32 beds is what my understanding is. And then this will be a day center. And I know you all have been clamoring, and rightfully so, is like, where do people go during the day? And I love the thoughtful approach. I got to see like the shower stalls, and the trauma-informed approach is that there's no dead ends. When you go into this building, like when you see the shower stalls, it's kind of a circular flow. And so I just really loved how thoughtful the planning of this building is. But having a day center where people can do their laundry, get access to computers, have food, whatever they need is going to be life-changing. And then there's this amazing, beautiful plaza, again, trauma-informed, and it will be enclosed. And then also folks are able to bring, their pets into the enclosed area too. So I think that is really, really going to be amazing. And I think, the co-occurrences, like, it's hard to separate out, is somebody having a mental health crisis, or are they having, a drug and alcohol? And, I think we have to address the co-occurrence of those things that are happening. And, part of the problem, I think, goes back to like the ballot measure 110. And I know that they're trying to move more money out, but you all know that there's been some challenges, and it's been incredibly slow. And I think what happened is the order of operation wasn't correct. So again, going back to the Portugal model, where they basically decriminalized, possession, but they already had their system set up. Treatment, and you all know that we're one of the lowest in treatment facilities. And so what we did with the ballot measure 110 is that we decriminalized, which is great, but we never set up the system on the back end for treatment. And so now we're kind of playing catch up. So I think, what trying to sort out, is it behavioral health? Is it mental health? I think it's more about how do we just provide the different types of interventions that are needed to catch people when they fall. And I think one of the ways is like I talked about the 24/7 first responder site. Right now, and Unity Center, we thought was going to be that, but I'm not sure that it was ever envisioned that would be really for those chronic urgent cases. I think it was kind of meant for a level down, but really that's what we're working on, is creating an urgent place where first responders can drop people off, because right now the only place they can take them, and you all know, is either jail or ERs. But if we have a place where people can be triaged, and then they can receive the appropriate services, whether it's behavioral health, whether it's drug and alcohol addiction, then that's really the secret. So and the other thing too, I think about, which is broader picture, is we have our son's school system, and we know our kids are struggling. And previously we would offer like after school programs and things like that, which are great. But I think there might be an opportunity to incorporate mental health programs, not only for students, but for families, maybe within our son's school system. And I was able to open up a student-based health center here at Reynolds High School. And I'm really, really happy about that. And so that is yet another opportunity to provide mental health, especially to our youth. So I think we have to make huge, huge investments, but I think mental health has to just be embedded into our schools. I toured our detention centers, and I know that they have some employee resource groups where they're working together to try to address mental health. And just by saying, it's kind of like, you get 6 days of sick leave, or you get 2 weeks vacation, and we do, we try to give people mental health days, but I really think it should be more codified that mental health services should just be part of our everyday practice.
Our next question is from Tony, and it is, what's your position on the potential People for Portland's ballot initiative? And anticipating your answer, what are you willing to do to help defeat it?
Well, I think Laura set me up pretty good when she talked about the 3,000 challenge. Like I get people's frustration, and People for Portland, what they're saying, why they're so frustrated is valid. I do not support their approach. I don't think criminalizing and warehousing people solves anything. But here's what I was thinking is that in Troutdale, so we have the 1,000 acres area. It's land that's owned by the Department of State Lands. And we probably have maybe 50, 60 individuals who are homeless who live out in that area. And we are also going to be opening a 50-bed alternative shelter in Troutdale. So my hope or my thought is if we could work really closely with our HOPE team and with those individuals, because I really, somebody said to me, we just have to be able to offer people something better than what they have. And frankly, y'all know anything's better than what they have. But by having some type of alternative shelter where maybe individuals have their own room, or they have the freedom to where they're going to feel like, yeah, I would be okay going to another place. So I'm hoping that we can kind of geographically help and encourage and motivate people to want to move into a place that's better than living at 1,000 acres. So that's one of the ways I think that we can address that. And the other thing is we haven't talked a lot about transitional housing. So you all know there's the continuum of, okay, get somebody into emergency shelter, but then where do they go? Where do they graduate? And maybe they go directly into housing or permanent supportive housing. Maybe they don't. We know that the path is different for every single person. But transitional housing is really important. We have something called My Father's House, which, and shout out, we need more services for families. But they're an organization that doesn't take any government funding, and their success ratio is about 80%. So they are helping families transition and to becoming, fully productive families, and able, to have jobs and be great parents to their kids. And then there's also the Salvation Army's Bridgeway of Hope, which is 90 beds of residential for men that have gone, they've just gone through treatment. But where do you go after that? Like, okay, you have to start, I mean, you all know Maslow's hierarchy of need is like, okay, I'm stable, I'm clean, but where do I go now? Well, you want to start thinking about a job and how you're going to support yourself. And so the Bridgeway of Hope, I'm hoping that it will get funded one way or another, and maybe through our supportive housing services measure. I know that they've applied for funding there, but they have a culinary school, beautiful kitchen. So the men there are able to stay there for up to 2 years. And they also want to partner with the trades. So they own the building, a big warehouse that's just adjacent to their residential treatment facility. And they want to talk about bringing the trades in. And this is amazing. So, I mean, it is that synergy of everyone, of our CBOs, our nonprofits, of government, of transitional housing providers, of trade unions. It really does remind me of the story of the stone soup, of like, whatever you have, bring it, and we can have a feast.
Great. Next question is from Vicky. It is, I live in the Roseway Madison neighborhood. We've had 4 gun-related deaths in 8 months and even more shootings. What is your position on the current gun violence and homicides on 82nd, resulting in disinvestment from local businesses in our neighborhoods and safety issues for our youth who attend McDaniel High School?
Yeah, it's terrible. I actually went, back in the day, it was called Madison High School. And I'm very happy that they changed the name to McDaniel, but I actually went to Madison High School. So I am very familiar with that area and know the challenges that neighborhood faces. Absolutely. I mean, I just attended the March Against Murder. I've been very active with Royal Harris. And I've also been working with a group called Control Alt Delete Hate, PDX. And they're associated with an organization called Cure Violence. And Cure Violence started out in Chicago because of the similarities that we're experiencing here of just record number of homicides. And their approach is to treat violence as a contagion. So what they do is they start out in the hospitals, in the ERs, and they built like these wraparound teams. And we do a lot of similar work, but I think that we really have to bring it up to scale. And I think we have to fund it. Because that when there's retaliation involved, that it's so much more than just one individual being harmed or murdered, that it impacts a family, a spouse, children, entire neighborhoods and communities. And so they have kind of a 3-point plan of how to, very much like you would a virus, is that first you have to detect it. And then you have to figure out, who are the most high risk individuals that could contract a disease. And violence is a disease. And then thirdly, it's about changing societal norms. And that's why the March Against Murder is important, because we have to stand up and say, this is not normal. This is not acceptable. And if we all keep silent and just say, well, it's just part of living in a big city, then there's no accountability. I was really touched. We marched from Fernhill Park to another park about 10 blocks away in North Portland this past weekend. And people came out of their houses and they were clapping and they were talking and waving and engaging. And while, that one march isn't going to change anything, it's by showing up and telling the community as an elected as a community member that you see and you hear what their concerns are, I think is incredibly important. And, and I am going to keep showing up for my community. I want to work on the fentanyl and the meth crisis. Again, all of this revolves sometimes with criminal justice issues. We've had a lot of catalytic converter theft car thefts, property crimes, that plays into the impact that businesses have to suffer. And again, as a small business owner, I get it. Like, you don't have $1,000 to fix a window or a door that's been smashed in, and especially when that happens multiple times. You know, maybe there's ways that we can look. I know City of Portland has a little small fund to help reimburse small business owners. But, you know, during COVID, like, I led the charge to distribute $1 million in small business grants, especially for women and minority-owned businesses. So as a small business owner, I completely get the challenges, and I'm going to work really hard to make sure that everyone's at the table, because really that's the only way we're going to solve this, is that we've got to get our youth, our public safety, our businesses, our neighborhood associations, all of you, and we just have to say, no, this is not acceptable.
I think we have time for one more question, and then that'll be our last for the Q&A. And kind of a follow-up on the last question, what is your approach for attracting businesses to Multnomah County?
Yeah, so unfortunately, businesses are leaving. People are leaving Multnomah County. And so I think through economic development, I see a path forward. You know, when we did the garage to storefront program, we brought in many businesses. And again, we know how expensive it is to start up a new business. So by waiving system development charges, by waiving business fees, I think we can work with a small business development center. A lot of times when you're a small business, you just don't have the support that you need. Sometimes you know, like being an insurance agent, many folks would come in and they're like, oh, you mean I need workers' comp and I need commercial insurance? Yes. So I think by really working with our partners who can help business would be one really good way to attract businesses downtown. You know, and the other thing too, and I'll just, you know, I don't think we're quite there yet, but, you know, the commercial inventory that we have downtown, if and when those property owners are ready to have a conversation, I think we could provide incentives for some of those commercial spaces to be converted into residential. And I think about, well, that could really sprout and support small businesses, because imagine, like, right now you have some population that is there just during the workday. But what would it look like if you had people, a larger population of people that live downtown 24/7? And it wasn't, you know, the reality is most people can't afford to live downtown. But if you had folks that could, that is where we could come in. We could help subsidize rents and have some more affordable housing. And then we're kind of creating a completely different kind of ecosystem. But you would have people there all the time that could support those businesses.
Thank you for that. I'll pass it back to Sahad.
Thank you, Commissioner Stegman, and thank you everybody for all of the wonderful questions. So now, before we wrap up, Commissioner Stegman, did you have any final words that you wanted to share?
Oh, thank you, Sahan. Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I'm running for Multnomah County Chair because I really feel like being the Multnomah County Commissioner for the last 5.5 years, like I've really found my true calling. I get up and I'm excited. You know, again, we talked about transforming justice today and how we could totally re-envision our criminal justice system. I think about how we could help lift people and break that cycle of poverty and connect people to home ownership. I just think about all of the challenges and barriers that people have, because frankly, I've had those too. And you all know how important peer-to-peer services are. And I think people that have lived experience with racism, with poverty, with food insecurity, like we know what the solutions are. And we know how to talk about it in a trauma-informed way. And you know, some people want to be something, and I want to do something. So I'm hoping that the voters of Multnomah County will give me that opportunity.
Well, thank you so much, Commissioner Stegman, for giving us this opportunity to hear more about you and your position. And thank you, everybody who was able to join us today and ask questions and get clarity so that we can all be educated voters as much as we possibly can. So with that, we will make sure that this recording is available following this cafe so it can